There exists a category of pain that operates in silence, a persistent, dull ache settled somewhere in the chest, carried through daily life like an unwelcome companion. This pain, while present, allows for continuity. One functions, one adapts, one builds routines around the discomfort. And then there exists an entirely different kind of wound. This wound does not merely cause suffering, it dismantles the architecture of meaning itself. It forces a complete reconstruction of everything that once felt solid, stable, and reliable. This was not a wound delivered from outside, not damage inflicted by a stranger or an enemy whose harmful capacity was already understood and anticipated. This wound emerged from the interior of what was supposed to be sanctuary. It tore through the foundations of trust and left nothing standing that could be recognized as normal. When betrayal originates from blood, from family, from those bound to us by the intimacies of shared history, it operates differently than any other form of harm. It does not arrive as an attack. It arrives as a revelation, uncovering not merely a single action but an entire concealed existence. The deception was woven into countless ordinary moments. Meals shared, laughter exchanged, memories created. When the truth finally surfaces, what becomes visible is not simply what was done, but the lie that was lived continuously, persistently, without interruption. This is why the shock radiates outward so rapidly, spreading through communities like an electrical current. People do not merely gasp or express surprise. They recoil physically, viscerally, because something ancient within them recognizes that an inviolable boundary has been crossed. The collective response to such revelations is not curiosity. It is something more primal, a physical revulsion that tightens the stomach and dries the mouth. When the truth emerges, it is not only one person who is exposed. An entire moral landscape becomes visible as corrupted, as fundamentally compromised. Streets that felt familiar suddenly seem foreign. Conversations that seemed innocent now carry the weight of contamination. People find themselves replaying years of memories, searching desperately for signs they might have missed, wondering how something so corrosive could exist in such close proximity without detection. The collapse of assumed safety, what unfolds in these moments, is not gossip or scandal. It is the catastrophic collapse of a shared assumption that had been held as self-evident. That family means protection, not predation. That those who share our blood, our name, our history, may fight and compete and resent one another, but that certain lines remain uncrossable. When those lines are shattered, the human mind struggles to absorb the reality. The nervous system responds to such revelations as threats to existence itself. If this could be possible, if this could have grown silently within the home, then what else about the world had been fundamentally misunderstood? This is why people feel unsteady after learning such truths. Their internal moral compass begins spinning without reference points. They respond not only to what occurred, but to the dawning recognition that harm does not always announce itself with warning signs. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it shares your name. Sometimes it knows precisely how to appear harmless while inflicting damage beyond imagination. Once this knowledge enters consciousness, it cannot be unlearned. It lingers in every silence, every interaction, every glance that seems to extend a fraction too long. The paralysis of pattern disruption. Human beings depend upon patterns. We construct mental maps of our world so that we can navigate daily existence without constant terror that each step might lead to catastrophe. For most people, family represents one of the most foundational patterns in this internal geography. It is the space where vulnerability is met with protection, where trust is assumed rather than earned, where loyalty remains unquestioned. The concept of a sibling carries accumulated weight. Years of shared experience, inside jokes, childhood arguments that seemed consequential then and trivial now, unspoken alliances that reinforced the sense of a safe place existing in an uncertain world. When that assumed safety collapses, when the person closest to you becomes the source of profound harm, the experience is not simply betrayal. It is a disruption of reality itself. People consistently underestimate how fragile their sense of normalcy actually is. The mind depends upon categories to function. These labels provide frameworks for interpreting events, predicting behavior, maintaining the feeling of control. Sibling, parent, friend, mentor. These words represent stabilizing structures in our internal architecture. When one of these structures fails catastrophically, the mind struggles to reconcile new information with assumptions built over an entire lifetime. Memories that once seemed innocent become suspect. Decisions that once felt wise now appear to have been made in blind trust. The collapse of the category, family member is trustworthy, can leave a person immobilized, as if their internal operating system has encountered an error it cannot resolve. The paralysis caused by such revelations is not a choice or a weakness. It is a survival response. The mind instinctively attempts to scan for patterns, to locate signs that were missed, to determine whether danger continues or has been resolved. But when the threat emerges from someone supposed to embody love and care, the mind confronts an impossible paradox. The person representing safety was simultaneously the source of danger. This creates a cognitive feedback loop that proves both exhausting and disorienting. Every familiar environment, home, family gatherings, the places of childhood, becomes a landscape filled with potential triggers. The affected individual may find themselves constantly on edge, unsure of what to trust, questioning everything they once took for granted. The horror of hidden architecture, the shock intensifies when considering the intimate knowledge the betrayer possesses. A sibling knows weaknesses, fears, the precise vulnerabilities where manipulation finds purchase. The betrayal exploits this knowledge, transforming the violation into something that feels like a manipulation of identity itself, of the very essence of who the person is. This explains why such truths do not merely hurt, they paralyze. The person who betrayed them had a hand in shaping their identity, and now that identity feels uncertain, contaminated, potentially false. The mind resists accepting that reality can be so cruel. Humans want to believe in goodness, in predictability, in justice. Confronted with deliberate harm from a family member, these beliefs shatter. People struggle to reconcile the life they believed they knew with a new reality that defies comprehension. Their bodies react before minds can fully process, palms sweating, heart rate spiking, stomachs knotting. These physiological responses represent ancient mechanisms designed to protect against immediate physical danger, yet here they are triggered by psychological and moral wounds. The paralysis is as much physical as mental. Questions spiral endlessly through consciousness. Why did this happen? Was I blind? Could I have prevented it? How long has this been unfolding? Each question opens another door to doubt and fear, making decisive action nearly impossible and clear thinking elusive. The very act of categorization, which normally brings clarity, becomes impossible in these circumstances. The mind cannot absorb this new reality without confronting the complete collapse of everything previously assumed safe. The trauma of realizing that a sibling, someone intrinsically linked to one's sense of self, was capable of deep harm does not fade quickly. It embeds itself in memory, permanently altering perception, relationships, and the understanding of trust. The paralysis it causes serves simultaneously as defense mechanism and symptom of profound shock when core assumptions about love, loyalty, and safety are dismantled. People remain frozen not because they lack strength, but because consciousness is grappling with a rupture in the fundamental framework of reality. The horror of deliberate concealment betrayal is never merely an event. It is a process, often unfolding over extended periods. What shocks people most is rarely the act itself, but the hidden architecture that allowed it to exist unobserved for so long. There exists a unique horror in realizing that someone trusted, someone whose presence was woven into the fabric of daily life, was capable of deliberate harm, and that this harm unfolded quietly, almost invisibly, over time. The mind struggles not only with the magnitude of the betrayal, but with its duration. How long had the deception been in place? How many moments apparently normal were actually staged performances designed to conceal malice? These questions gnaw at understanding, leaving a sense of disorientation that proves as exhausting as it is terrifying. The ordinary appearance of the betrayer amplifies the shock. Humans assume that harm will announce itself through aggression, anger, or erratic behavior. Hidden betrayal is often precisely the opposite: calm, measured, ordinary. A person who smiles, laughs, participates in daily routines can simultaneously orchestrate actions that undermine trust and inflict serious harm. This creates cognitive dissonance that the brain struggles to reconcile. The combination of familiarity and malevolence forces the mind to question everything. It undermines confidence in judgment, compelling re-examination of years of shared experiences with suspicion. Hidden betrayal exploits human empathy and the assumption that relationships operate reciprocally, that care begets care, that family members share similar moral codes, that love provides protection against malicious intent. When these assumptions fail, the resulting shock is profound. The betrayal is not only moral but existential, calling into question the reliability of social intuition itself. The instincts that have guided someone through life now seem unreliable, leaving them feeling vulnerable and uncertain. The social dimension of betrayal, the calculated nature of hidden betrayal, introduces another layer of horror. This is not impulsive harm born from anger or momentary failure of restraint. It is deliberate, rationalized, carefully concealed. The perpetrator understands the victim's expectations, weaknesses, thresholds. Every action is measured, every facade maintained with precision. This creates a sense of inevitability and helplessness. If someone so close could manipulate events for so long without detection, then the world itself seems less predictable, less safe. The mind instinctively recoils from this realization, explaining the depth of shock and disgust that follows such revelations. Betrayal's duration magnifies emotional impact immeasurably. Short-lived offenses can be contextualized, forgiven, compartmentalized. When harm stretches over months or years, it creates a dense web of deception. Every memory becomes tainted with doubt. Ordinary gestures and shared experiences grow suspect. The victim begins to see shadows in previously mundane interactions, replaying conversations and events in search of hidden meaning. This obsessive review represents not paranoia but a natural response, the brain attempting to reconstruct an accurate picture of reality after it has been fundamentally warped by duplicity. Hidden betrayal forces confrontation with one of humanity's most uncomfortable truths. Evil is not always visible, and it can wear a familiar face. This realization unsettles more than immediate trust. It destabilizes the perception of morality itself. If someone who shares blood, history, and intimacy can harbor secret malevolence, then moral boundaries prove more fragile than previously assumed. People experience not only anger or sadness, but an existential disorientation that persists long after initial shock has passed. Once revealed, hidden betrayal imposes consequences beyond the immediate victim-perpetrator relationship. Friends, extended family, entire communities struggle with their own reactions, wondering how they missed signs, questioning their judgments, feeling complicit in oversight. The psychology of hidden betrayal spreads outward, creating ripples of disbelief, shame, and reevaluation touching everyone connected to the revelation. The weight of collective complicity when betrayal of this magnitude becomes known, the shock rarely remains contained within the immediate victim. It radiates outward, touching everyone connected to the situation in ways profoundly uncomfortable. The community's reaction is not directed solely at the person who committed the act. A creeping realization spreads through witnesses. They too played a part, through inaction, disbelief, or casual dismissal. Humans possess a tendency to ignore small warning signs, rationalize odd behavior, preserve comfort over confrontation. When truth finally erupts, those past choices or failures to act become glaringly obvious. The community suddenly sees itself reflected in the betrayal, and the reflection is disturbing. People begin remembering moments previously dismissed, a comment that felt slightly off, a glance that lingered too long, a joke that seemed harmless at the time. These fragments, once easily overlooked, now carry ominous weight. What once seemed normal now appears as threads in a web of concealment. The town realizes the danger was never completely hidden. It was hiding in plain sight, and everyone unconsciously allowed it to exist. This explains why complicity often feels inescapable. It is not only about action, but about omission, about failures to confront what seemed minor or irrelevant in the moment. Collective guilt intensifies through memory itself. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. Confronted with betrayal, the mind frantically retraces past interactions, searching for evidence that could have predicted outcomes. For the community, this creates a collective replay of years, decades of ordinary life. Every handshake, smile, casual conversation is reevaluated under the harsh light of revelation. People feel shame not only for what they knew but for what they ignored, and this shame spreads like wildfire, seeding doubt and mistrust throughout social connections. There exists an instinctive desire to assign blame beyond the individual perpetrator. It is easier for the mind to process horror if responsibility can be distributed. If moral collapse appears systemic rather than concentrated in a single person, this explains why communities often respond by scrutinizing neighbors, families, institutions. Everyone is interrogated silently in memory. Everyone's judgment is questioned. The community measures itself against standards of vigilance, empathy, and integrity, and often finds itself wanting. Complicity is reinforced through social mechanisms of denial. Communities avoid difficult truths to preserve cohesion. Subtle pressure exists to maintain appearances, to act as though the fabric of society remains intact even when it has been irreparably frayed. This makes revelations even more shocking because they pierce protective illusions upon which people relied for comfort. The realization that deception thrived undetected challenges the community's collective sense of competence, morality, and intuition. The transformation of the betrayed being betrayed by a sibling strikes at the very foundation of identity. The person who was trusted, with whom laughter and memories and secrets were shared, is revealed as a source of harm. This forces confrontation with reality as disorienting as it is painful. Every memory of shared childhood moments becomes suspect. Every gesture of affection, every act of care is replayed and reinterpreted through the lens of betrayal. The mind struggles to separate what was genuine from what was calculated. This relentless reevaluation proves exhausting, creating instability that pervades every aspect of life. Trust broken at this depth is extraordinarily difficult to rebuild. Ordinary relationships outside the family become affected because the brain begins questioning the reliability of people in general. A sibling's betrayal damages uniquely because it exploits familiarity. The person was intimately known, and that knowledge was used to manipulate, control, or cause harm. This deepens vulnerability profoundly. If someone who knows you so well can cause such devastation, how can anyone else be trusted? This question becomes a shadow, influencing interactions, judgments, even self-perception. Certainty erodes. Life once felt predictable within family boundaries, and those boundaries provided security. The betrayal shatters this assumption, leaving a void where confidence in one's judgments and perceptions once resided. Decision-making becomes fraught because the mind has learned that appearances can deceive, that familiarity does not guarantee safety. The affected individual may become hyper-aware, constantly scanning for hidden motives, reading between lines, questioning intentions in ways that prove exhausting and isolating. The emotional impact compounds through moral complexity. A sibling shares blood, history, a degree of loyalty often taken for granted. Reconciling the affection that existed with the harm inflicted approaches impossibility. The mind oscillates between love and anger, nostalgia and disgust, loyalty and self-preservation. These conflicting emotions create internal tension that makes processing the betrayal even more challenging. The task is not merely recognizing wrongdoing, but restructuring understanding of an entire relationship and the person who was once trusted without question. The emergence of clarity, yet from this devastation, a paradoxical clarity can emerge. Once the worst truth is known, illusions lose their power. The betrayed individual sees people and situations as they truly are, without the comforting filter of idealization. This brutal honesty proves painful but also brings empowerment. No longer exists room for self-deception, for excusing behavior, for romanticizing those who caused harm. The person becomes skilled at recognizing manipulation and duplicity in ways that were impossible before. Strength in this context begins not as emotional surge, but as disciplined awareness of reality. Survivors of such betrayal often develop acute moral compass. They learn to set boundaries decisively, prioritize their own well-being, recognize danger before it fully manifests. The pain becomes a teacher, and its lessons prove profound and enduring. Every relationship, every interaction passes through a new lens balancing caution with discernment. The aftermath leaves scars, certainly, but also reshapes character. It forces reckoning with reality that proves both painful and illuminating. The betrayed person navigates a transformed inner landscape marked by vigilance, insight, and hard-won clarity about human nature and the fragility of trust. This experience, while devastating, has capacity to forge resilience and understanding that would have been unreachable under protection of innocence. The power of disgust represents more than simple emotional reaction. It functions as a moral compass manifested physically, signaling that something fundamental has been violated. When betrayal comes from a sibling, someone intimately connected, someone assumed protective and loving, disgust intensifies to almost unbearable degrees. The violation is not abstract or distant, it is deeply personal. The body reacts before the mind fully processes, tightening, recoiling, rejecting. This visceral acknowledgement recognizes that a line has been crossed, one that should never have been approached, let alone crossed. The intensity of disgust stems from the sheer breach of trust. Trust forms the foundation of human relationships, and familial trust is often first and strongest. A sibling occupies unique space, constant companion, confidant. Having that space used for harm creates an inversion of safety itself. The mind instinctively recoils from this inversion because it undermines the core assumption that those closest are protectors, not predators. When this assumption shatters, body and psyche respond with profound revulsion. A social dimension exists to this disgust as well. Society holds unwritten rules about familial loyalty, about boundaries that must not be crossed. When these rules break, people feel compelled to respond not only with anger but with moral and emotional rejection. Disgust functions as mechanism of social correction, a way for bodies and communities to signal that certain behaviors are intolerable, that they threaten integrity of the social fabric. Disgust amplifies because betrayal from a sibling is seen as preventable. Unlike strangers or distant acquaintances, siblings share history and mutual understanding. The harm they cause is interpreted as conscious violation of ethical and emotional codes. This intentionality intensifies reaction. People are not merely shocked by the act itself, but appalled by awareness that someone so close, so familiar, could engage in deliberate harm without remorse or hesitation. The sensation of disgust also serves protective function. It is the body's way of enforcing boundaries that have been violated. When a sibling, the person whose closeness was assumed safe, commits harm, disgust creates physical and psychological barriers. It signals that contact, interaction, or emotional vulnerability with this individual is dangerous. This response is not merely emotional, it is adaptive, helping the betrayed person maintain necessary distance, recognize the threat inherent in someone who has proven capable of profound harm, and prioritize self-preservation over lingering attachment or obligation. The aftermath of revelation truth rarely arrives in whispers. It crashes in unannounced, like a force of nature, leaving the landscape of life utterly transformed. Revelation of betrayal, especially from a sibling, is not momentary shock but rupture. It sweeps through relationships, memories, and perceptions, leaving nothing untouched. Every assumption once reliable becomes questionable. Every sense of safety feels provisional. The very foundation upon which identity was built seems unstable. In immediate aftermath, the world feels harsher, lonelier, more unpredictable. What once seemed familiar, the family home, shared experiences, conversations, laughter, now carries undertones of deception. Even ordinary spaces feel charged with unease. The mind instinctively searches for clarity in chaos, attempting to rebuild understanding from fractured pieces. The initial wave of emotional turmoil can overwhelm. Anger, disbelief, sadness, shame, and confusion collide, leaving the affected person struggling to reconcile reality with memory. The mind cycles endlessly through moments past, replaying them, questioning them, seeking patterns that might have revealed truth sooner. Every interaction is examined under harsh new light. Relationships that were once effortless suddenly require careful navigation. This period is disorienting because it involves not only confronting the betrayer's actions, but confronting one's own perception, judgment, and trust in the world. The betrayal forces uncomfortable self-assessment. What was missed? What was excused? What was believed without evidence? Yet in the midst of chaos, clarity begins to emerge. Once truth has been faced, illusions lose power. The mind is freed from needing to rationalize harmful behavior or preserve comforting narratives. The betrayed person sees the situation as it truly is, without filter or excuse. This brutal honesty proves painful but also liberating, allowing precise understanding of who can be trusted, where boundaries must be drawn, what actions are necessary to protect against future harm. This clarity is not naive optimism but disciplined recognition, sober acknowledgement of reality rather than fantasy. From this clarity comes responsibility, navigating aftermath with intention, making choices that prioritize well-being, safety, and integrity. Boundaries become essential tools for survival and growth rather than abstract concepts. Establishing them may be uncomfortable, may provoke resistance, may further fracture relationships, but proves unavoidable. Healing is neither linear nor immediate. Setbacks occur, moments when memories trigger intense responses, periods when trust in others wavers. These experiences are part of the process, not signs of weakness, but evidence that mind and heart are integrating new realities. With time, the survivor develops resilience, refined intuition, sharper discernment. They learn to navigate relationships with caution but without cynicism, engage with the world while protecting themselves, recognize potential threats before they escalate. The lessons of betrayal, though harsh, become guides for future decisions and interactions. What follows revelation is transformation. A person who endures such betrayal emerges with heightened awareness of human nature, deeper understanding of boundaries, profound recognition of moral and emotional truths. Disgust, shock, and grief are not indicators of weakness, but honest reactions to violation of trust. Through these reactions comes opportunity to reconstruct life on foundation of reality, cultivate relationships built on truth rather than assumption, reclaim agency in a world that temporarily lost all sense of moral order. What remains after the wreckage is not despair. It is clarity, strength, and the quiet, unyielding power of someone who has faced the worst and chosen to rise. From this vantage point, every decision, every interaction, every boundary set is informed by hard-earned insight. Life becomes not passive experience, but intentional reconstruction guided by unflinching recognition of what is true and what is necessary. This is the aftermath of revelation, a life rebuilt on clarity, resilience, and unwavering commitment to honor oneself above all else.